Hi, and welcome back again to Tim Bingham's Options and Volatility newsletter. We'll be taking a look at this video at a vol captured UOA covered call trade in ALIT, ALIT, kind of a workplace light stock, if you will, where some big time unusual option activity sets up for a big time way to follow the flow with some bullish lean and capture the huge implied volatility. So let's jump in and take a look, shall we? First of all, here's a light showing up on one of the scanners I use. You can see this is from yesterday, over 67,000 contracts traded versus normal volume of just over 1,000. So over 50 times the normal volume. More importantly, the implied volatility almost doubled, up 88%, ranking right near the top implied volatility over the past 12 months. We can jump in and take a look at it in this manner. Here is the IV chart, right, from the previous day to the day of that big call buying. You can see how much the IV lifted across the entire term structure volatility. Here's the volume on the different expiration dates. You can see IV lifted everywhere. Percentage-wise, certainly is almost always shorter term lifted, but even back month lifted as well. Here it is on a kind of smooth basis, right? The at the money IV, which was hovering right around the 40 level, right, exploded to almost the 70 level. So again, almost doubling in price. We can also take a look at the covered call, a simple covered call trade. So if we take a look, here's the actual big option volume. You can see the main chunk of it out on the slightly out of the money January 4 calls were over 42,000 of these options traded versus only 151 open interest, the hallmark of unusual option activity, to say the least. And more importantly, you can see the IV closed at just over 67. If we go back to the last trading day, which was last Friday, the stock was at 389, right? IV under 50, right? You can see the January 4 calls were trading 35 to 45 cents, 40-cent midpoint. Fast forward to the day of that big call buying, you can see the stock did rise 9 cents, right? The options jumped 25 cents, right? So the options, which were still slightly out of the money, right, moved basically triple the price of the stock, outpaced the stock price gain, which sets up ideally for a covered call trade. You can see here the day before, right, last Friday, the big call buying, the covered call, right, buying the stock, selling that January slightly out of the money forward call would have cost you about $3.50 roughly. You can see because of that big call buying, the stock went up in price, but the covered call actually got cheaper by a fair amount, by almost 20 cents, which for a $4-ish stock is a big, big difference, right? So the option closed basically at 62 cents because of that big call buying. The Friday before it closed at 40 cents. So you saw the option go up 22 cents, the stock up only about 9 cents, sets up ideally to follow the flow, right, lean bullishly with that call buying. The delta on these calls are pretty much at the money, about a 50 delta. So you're basically lowering your exposure, right, but still leaning bullishly, and more importantly, capturing that IV and looking for that IV to revert back as it always has in the past, right? If we take a look at the IV chart, right, you can see that explosion in implied volatility. Here it was from earnings, right, the normal vol crush, but IV basically back at the highest level over the past year. Each time it spiked, right, it almost invariably reverts. That's what we're looking for here. As far as taking a look using Pilot AI at kind of what the analysts and so forth think of ALIT, right, you can see it is making money, right? It's already profitable on a quarterly basis, and it's expected to be so down the road. So this is a stock that is still churning out money, right? Getting actually comparatively cheap on a PE basis. They're expected to make about 60 cents a share, right, for full year 2025, which would put it definitely in the cheaper camp. You can see the analysts, again, using Pilot AI, like it, right? 4 strong buy, 7 as a buy, only 2 as a hold. Consensus is around 11 bucks, which certainly would be fine. Anywhere around 4 come January will max out the trade, have a very nice return, right? Getting in at under $3.40 out at 4 will give you basically about a 20% return for holding the stock. So leaning bullishly with that huge, massive call buying and capturing the implied volatility is what we look to do here day in and day out at options and volatility. So until next time, as always, here's to good trading.